All right. So, logs and logging. So, do we even need to log? The answer is, according to the FCC, as of November 1982, no, you don't have to log. Now, a lot of us spent our formative years working where you had to. And so we're just automatically conditioned to log. But the requirement was eliminated. There are a lot of hams still log at least some of your QSOs. Some of them that I don't log personally are repeater contacts and test transmissions like, check the SWR, the ALC, tune, DQRM of 3Y0K, DQRM of the local repeater. I don't log that. Actually, of course, I'm joking about the DQRM, but, I guarantee you those people aren't logging that. So, why even log? Well, one, so you don't look like a moron when somebody asks you for a QSL card or a logbook of the world update. You don't want to say, well, I don't log any of my contacts, because then they're going to go, wow. You do have some hams that absolutely refuse QSL. That is their right. It's also my right to ignore them when I see them on the bands, in which I do. Awards. You want paper? You want a DXCC? You got to get through me. Yeah, what he said. You got to get through me or one of the card checkers if you have paper cards. If you have a logbook of the world, you can get DXCC through that way, and you'll never see my friendly face. But if you want an award, you have to have a log, and you have to get QSLs for the contacts. Propagation. If you look at your logs long enough and you sort them out, you can kind of figure out some things. You can figure out that once it gets nice and high up, the higher bands tend to propagate better. Middle of the night, 10 meters, probably not going to propagate that well, except in rare situations. You'll get some 21, 24, 28 megahertz propagation to parts of the world you're not expecting. Very good thing there. So looking at your logs and, figuring out, hey, let me look at my 12 meter contacts. You go, all right, well, 12 meters has been open to about 2100, Zulu. So 1600, after 4 o'clock local, well, not so much. Finally, the FCC. Even though you don't have to log, if you want any special dispensation from the FCC, you're going to have to demonstrate to their satisfaction that you're meeting the requirements. I'll give you a specific example. In the state of Florida, on 440 to 420 to 450 megahertz, the 70 centimeter band, state of Florida has a 50 watt limit. How many people knew that? Art, Matt, Wes, the usual suspects knew that. A lot of people, you guys didn't even know that. There's a 50 watt limit. You say, well, wait a minute. The regs say I can run 1500 watts on my extra class license. Yeah, but 47 CFR 2.106 has a whole boat locker of restrictions. And that boat locker includes a restriction for the state of Florida that says 50 watts maximum. In order to use more than that, you got to reach out and get permission from both the FCC and the Air Force. And by the way, they do tell you who to contact to do that. What I would suggest you do is you run 50 watts and you make a log of all your contacts. You have a list of all your equipment, and you send it to the two people you got to send it to, the coordinator for the Air Force and the FCC. and you ask for permission that way. But without the log, that dog won't hunt. That's a Southern phrase right there. So where to start? You can start with paper log. You're cheap. You know, it doesn't even have to be an actual logbook. It can be a spiral notebook. It can be notebook paper. It can be a napkin. You know, it can be toilet paper, even though that's a little bit difficult to write on. You know, but the problem with paper logs is if you then want to transfer it to an electronic log, you're going to have to spend some BIC time, button chair, to get those logs into your electronic log. So to make that a little easier, let's do a little advice. You know, make sure you have your date and time. Make sure you have the call sign work, of course. The band and or frequency. If you look, the ARRL for DXCC purposes, SOTA, Summits on the Air, POTA, Parks on the Air, none of them require you to have the frequency, but they require you to have the band. You have to have one or the other. Usually what happens is if you put the frequency and you don't put the band, the programs will look at the frequency that you give and it can figure out the band from there. Got to have the mode. And in some cases, you're going to have a mode and you're going to have a sub mode. You will see where if you look at a log, an electronic log, it will say mode, MFSK, multi-frequency shift keying. And then it will have a sub mode like FT8, FT4, the brand new FT2. Anybody using FT2 yet? How you like it, John? Works? Quick, isn't it? Mm-hmm. What are you using to keep the clock on your computer? You got Mindberg installed, or Mindberg Dimension 4? Those are really good. There's somebody's just come out with a new one that's designed to be a little bit more ham friendly with older equipment, you know. But Mindberg, as far as I know, still puts out a 32-bit version for Windows. So you guys running XP aren't dead yet. So, report given, report received. Not required for ARRL, but supposed to get a QSL card request. Then you probably want to have it on there because they're going to give it to you. And then other info is needed. It can be a park number, a Summit number, IOTA number, you know, Walmart number, McDonald's number, whatever program you're doing, the other info. VHF, you need a grid number. Sometimes you do need the different info. Hey, look at this, VHF contest. Date and time in UTC, yep. Call sign, yep. Band and or frequency, yep. Mode, yep. And I would, by the way, keep FM voice separate from AM, from single sideband voice separate from AM voice. Why? Because it's nice to know that. Not only that, in the case of the digital modes, if you want a CQ award, RTTY's a different award from digital for the CQ awards. And they never shall the twain cross. You cannot use RTTY for the digital award, and you can't use digital for the RTTY award. Report given, report received, not needed. Nope. You don't need it. It's not part of the contest rules. Now, if you listen during the VHF contest, and if somebody's working CW or phone, you'll often hear them say, "Yeah, I'm an EL88. That's this grid, by the way, and I'm running, you know, and you're 5x9, or you're 5x5, or you're 5x6, but you're off the side of the antenna because I'm too lazy to turn it." You know, other info is required. You got to know your 4 or 6 digit locator. You go, wait a minute, 4 digit. If you're in VHF, if you're on 6 meters, if you're on 2 meters, EL88 is enough. But let's say you decide to do 10 gigahertz. You go and you buy that IC905. You buy that fancy transverter that gets you all the way up to 10 gigahertz, and you buy that I think it's $1,100 for just the dish. And so you go ahead and you fork over your $7,000 or so, and you get on 10 gigahertz. Well, when you send the grid out, EL88 will not be enough. You're going to have to send out EL88SA if you're at the clubhouse. And by the way, if you make a 10 gigahertz contact from the clubhouse here, I think everybody's going to want to hear about it, unless it's just right down the street to somebody, because that would be pretty spectacular because we're on flat ground. Maybe you'd have somebody out in the field with a unit. Example 2, as the French would say. You know, field day. You need the date and time. You need the call sign. You need the band of frequency. You need the mode. You don't need the report. Again, report not required, but got to know the type of you got to know the type of station you are, and you got to know your section. Section here is Whiskey Charlie Foxtrot, West Central Florida. The station will depend. If you operate our CW station, you will be 1 alpha, meaning you will be running off of generator power, or you will be using equipment that we have transported out to a trailer in the field. And hopefully the air conditioning will be running when you're getting it, because if not, you're going to die. If you're in here, you'll be 1 echo in all likelihood. You'll be using home, you'll be using inside, you know, in a building and all that, and using the existing equipment, but you will be attached to a generator instead of running off of commercial mains. I think it's 1 delta if you're running off commercial mains. Is that correct, Art? Okay, so that's what you need for that log. Notice those are 2 cases where you don't need a signal report. So you don't need it, but if you get it, great. Like I said, you're working a VHF contest and people keep giving you signal reports, smile politely and take it down. It might be convenient later on. This is a paper log example, you know, and just for a simple day, I just kind of wrote something off the top of my head where, you know, Mike in Massachusetts, he's a big POTA activator. AA4BW, he's one of the NOGA, North Georgia QRP people. I actually worked him on CW fairly recently. You can see where I worked Darius and Chad and Desacheo. And I even put a note, you know, is all that needed? Don't know. My backyard, EL87 was a Shido G90, which by the way is pretty good little radio. Multi-day, you can see where I've built it up a little bit for a multiple day. And, you know, Joel at 35 words a minute again, V44KAI. Oh, yeah, he is fun to copy. You will say a lot of words that Mac would not approve of. You know. They're using, he's operating remote in Cameroon, Desacheo again, kind in the Pharaoh. And notice what I did. I said I forgot the power knob, which happens with the 590 when I turn the amp off sometimes. So that's how a multi-day log can look. And that's when you can build in Microsoft Word, you can print off as many pages as you want and you're good to go. You know, cheap. Ham-friendly, it would be the word I would phrase. You can buy logs. These are coupled by the ARRL, but not just the ARRL. Here's an example sheet here's an example sheet that I found on the internet. You can print that. It was a PDF, so you don't even have to have LibreOffice or Microsoft Office. You don't have all you got to do is just have the Adobe Reader and print it and call it a day and continue with your life. So now let's talk about electronic logbooks. They can be as simple as logging only. They can have the ability to talk to your transceiver to get the band data, frequency, band, mode data. They can get all that. If it's part of a program that does transmissions like WSJTX, MSHV, DM780, which is part of the Ham Radio Deluxe program, FL Digi, that's another great one. It'll even get you, it can even get you in some cases the signal report and stuff like that. So all you basically got to do is just hit enter. In some cases, it'll once you initiate the contact, it'll go through and log it automatically when it completes. So it can be part of a bigger program, but there's some important things you really want to know. You need to know your operating system. If you want to try to run a Mac OS program on Windows or a Windows program on Mac OS, be my guest. I don't think it's going to go well. You got to know the hardware requirements also, and I don't care who that is. I'm not talking to them anyway. You got to know the hardware requirements. If it requires Windows 11, which means it'll require like a 8th or 9th generation i3, i5, i7, i9, and you've got a computer bopping along from 2015 that's running a 2nd generation i3, probably ain't going to go well for you. If you're running a 32-bit operating system, don't try to install a 64-bit program on it. Plugins, libraries, other software. HamLib is the big one, HAMLIB. You see that a lot when you have a failure to communicate between your Linux box and your radio. So, and there's several different versions of HamLib, and you got to make sure you got the right one, because some programs only work with certain versions. In some cases, you may have to set it up where as part of the startup, the first thing it does is goes and grabs the correct version and loads that up and unloads any other versions. It gets tricky. So basically, I'm saying, hey, do your homework. Do your homework first. That way, you make life easier on yourself. Do not try to do this at the beginning of a POTA activation in the middle of nowhere. You're out on East Possum Butt Island, and you're trying to do a POTA activation. By the way, of course you didn't bring paper and pen, or you want to do all digital, and then all of a sudden stuff don't work. Not good. So ADIF. You're going to hear a lot about ADIF. ADIF basically is the way the logs put the data together. And basically, anybody who's worked with HTML will recognize kind of where they got ADIF. ADIF basically, I'll just tell you from here. Actually, better yet, I'll show you. Your sample ADIF file. You can see it looks a lot like HTML. You have the brackets, and then you have the thing inside, but instead of a B or a /B to indicate turning on and turning off the bright, you've got instead information and then a number after the colon. In this case, if you look, the first one, you see call 5, K5TIA. Well, how many digits are in that call sign? 5. So, KX4TT, we should see call 5. Larry, KM4LEW, it should be call 6. Otherwise, if it says call 5, all that the computer and all the awards programs and everybody else is going to pick up as KM4LE. And let's say you go the other way. Let's say you put call 6 and only 5 digits. You put my call sign, KX4TT, but you put call 6. You're probably going to error out at that point. It will not like it. Your electronic logs, DXCC, Logbook of the World won't like it. And the blue part at the top, that's just a header. It tells you, it just says when you created it and the program. And by the way, program can be anything. You can use Notepad to create ADIFs. In fact, I use Notepad to edit and write them all the time. It is really convenient. And not only that, did you know this? Did you know that if you take an ADIF and you create a text file and then you try to upload it through Logbook of the World, what does Logbook of the World do? It uploads it. It doesn't care. It still reads the data. It doesn't even look at the header. It looks at just the data that is read there. Why the insistence on it though? Because it is the standard. You will be using ADIF or you will be SOL. You know, the OL is out of luck, and you can kind of guess what the S is. It's the standard. You want to use Logbook of the World? You want to use any of the major electronic logs? That's what you got. And I know it's not just logging programs, it's everybody else. ADIF is a must, but the good news is all the electronic logs support it. You might hear about AMX. AMX is an attempt to update ADIF to using XML type language the way that we're doing it with some of the new internet sites and with some of the information transfer between your computer and the internet uses XML. But AMX is still in its infancy, so ADIF's still it. So let's talk about programs. You got N1MM. N1MM is a great contest program. For general logging, it may be a bit like using a chainsaw to cut an onion. It is powerful, but it has a learning curve and you really have to work at it. It is Windows only. It does talk to other programs pretty well. Might not be the best for newbies. N3FJP, Scott is N3FJP. I can't say enough good things about Scott. The guy is responsive. He will let you know what you need to know. He is always willing to help. You do have to pay for the program, but the AC log program, I think that's what his is, or amateur contact log or something like that. It's just $40, and that's one time. That's not every year. That's not every 6 months. That's not $40 and a pint of blood. It is $40, and that is it. Lifetime. And Scott's really responsive. If you want the contesting little upgrades and stuff, it's another $20. Give him $60, call it a day. Be very, very happy. We, by the way, do have N3FJP as an operating logging program here at the club. We do have a contract with Scott for just the club. I can recommend it, you know, and that's saying a lot. Log4OM, and there's Log4OM version 2 now. Great program, learning curve. It's ham friendly, free, you know, you can give them a donation, you know. But it has a log. It does have a lot of learning to do. You have to work with it because it's a little bit like N1MM, and it has a lot of available windows, and there are a lot of them that you're not necessarily going to use unless you're into certain things like contesting VHF work, low band work, Earth, Moon, Earth. It's really, really good for that. We'll talk about Ham Radio Deluxe. They do everything, or at least they try. Ham Radio Deluxe is a set of packages. It not only includes the logging program, it includes a digital mode program that'll run RIDI and PSK 31 and PSK 63. And if you really like those wide ass signals, PSK 125, it'll run Olivia, it'll run MSK. It does Windows and it spays cats. It's one of those programs. It does everything. However, there's costs associated with it. And that is, you're going to pay $99 up front. You're going to pay $50 a year for updates. It's a good program now. And if you really need your handheld, either N3FJP if you need mainly a logger, or Ham Radio Deluxe if you need all of it and want all of it, and you want it all integrated. Those are good programs. So Screens on these programs are all kind of similar. This is N1MM right here. And if you look, the one on the left says manual. You know why it says manual? Because N1MM ain't talking to a radio. So it's set for 14.2, and all you need to do is it's set for the CQ, one of the CQ contests. So where all you have to do is just type in, notice what it requires, signal report and your zone. The other one, this actually is hooked up to the radio to K3, and it's saying, hey, you know, what all do you need? It's contest specific. If you want a general log out of N1MM, you are going to have to build. You're going to have to build what you want. But it allows for that, but there's where the learning curve comes in. You're going to have to really read through it. Read through the instructions to do it. You had a question.
N1MM does have a general DS.
It does.
Log which you can use. They don't suggest that Tom says don't do it unless you just need something quick.
Exactly, and I agree with that. I agree with that assessment because it's a good log if you're doing a vacation mode de-expedition from East Possum Butt Island, and you know you're going to give out some QSOs to the deserving. It's a good program to use because you can sit there and just go. N3FJP. Notice you got the recent contacts at the top, and you got the information that you can add at the bottom. However, it will also talk to the radio, so that way band and that information can be added automatically. So all you have to do is add the call sign you're talking to and all that information. It allows for editing. You know, this is actually an editing screen. Log 4OM. You can see what I mean. It's that one on the lower left is a little bit, there's a lot there. And there's more that can be added. Well, but the screen on the top is pretty simple. You know, call sign, signal report. It's grabbing the information from your rig. So there's start and end time. Boom. There you go. You're good to go. Even has a spot for notes. You know, Ham Radio Deluxe. I wanted to show you Ham Radio Deluxe because you got the log over here, but you also got PSK31 on the program DM780, which is part of it, of Ham Radio Deluxe. So you can see some integration there. You can see where he's running something in DM780, and when he's done and he hits enter to start a new QSO, it'll automatically add it to the log. There's a lot of stuff there, you know, but it's in the background sometimes, and N1MM is really good about putting stuff in the background. Sometimes it's all over the place, and you're going, wow, so those are 4 options. There are others, you know, but let's say you have another OS. You got Linux. CQR log is pretty popular. That's a pretty good one. Especially if you use more than one OS, because if you're using more than one operating system, a lot of times you can end up with, let's say you have a Linux box, you have a Raspberry Pi. You got a Raspberry Pi 5 in a box that you're going to use portable. You got your Windows desktop at home, and you got a MacBook. You could end up with 3 logging programs very easily that way. CQR log has the ability to go into more than one platform. You got plenty of loggers for both the Debian and the Red Hat type Linuxes. So it doesn't matter what flavor of Linux, you can probably make a logging program work on it. You may have to grab a tarball and compile yourself. You may have to add some auxiliary libraries. Remember that ham lib? That might be one of them. And it is rumored Notice rumored, as in Elvis sighting. I haven't seen it, you know. I'm looking at kind of the way I do an Elvis sighting. It's rumored that N1MM and Log4OM will run online. Don't know. I haven't even tried it. You know. Hmm?
I said, why would you use it? I've got one box, which happens to be a Mac that runs Windows.
Yeah.
Windows and Linux.
Hmm.
I just got one straight.
Yeah, a lot of people run virtual machines, and if you're running a virtual machine on a Linux or a Mac box, and you're running Win 11 virtually, you should be able to run N1MM or Log4OM. There is stuff for Mac. Rumlog Mac, Mac Logger, those are for the Mac people. So you're not SOL if you don't have Windows. You got Mac, Android, because there are some people that will never put their phone down. Especially young people. You'll see them; they'll hold their phone. I'm like, dude, that's not a worry stone. That's just a Apple iPhone. And you got iOS and you got Android, and there's loggers for both of them. Whether it be HamRS, whether it be QSOMate, you got Klog, which I mentioned at the bottom. I mentioned that before we started. Klog, really simple program, runs on Windows, runs on Mac, runs on Linux. Yeah, even better. So that means you only have to have one spot, and it'll take care of all your logs. When we're going to talk about that central data source spot in a sec, and you get to try before you buy. 2 of them are free, but you got a learning curve. Ham Radio and Deluxe and N3FJP, they have trials, and the trials are free. Try them out for 30 days, decide if you like it. Ask questions. I've already told you Scott's really well known for his support. HRD has support. The N1MM, you want support, ain't getting any. Not from the developer. They're busy writing updates and busy coding some new cool stuff into it. But there's a user group for N1MM, a big user group. And the guys on that user group are technically gifted in many cases. Our own W4LT can probably figure out 99% of the issues you would have with N1MM, and probably can do it faster than it takes for you to make a cup of coffee. Same thing with Log4OM. There's a user group. They're savvy. You got YouTube videos. There's stuff online to help you set this up. So, yeah. And the warning for you cell phone users. Some of you are going to try FT8CN or something like that on your tablet. You got an iPad, or you got a one of the Samsung Android tablets. You might try a program out on it, and it runs great. So you say, hey, I'm just going to transfer this over to my phone. You go out in the boonies, and you find out it doesn't look good, and you may not be able to read it, even with super prescription, glasses that look like Coke bottles. So find this out before you leave. Test all your crap out. Test it at home. And carry pen and paper, because you know what? That your computerized crap may go down, but that pen and paper will still work. So storing the log electronically. Sure, have your log on your computer, but have copies of it. Back up copies regularly. This should be a reflex reaction. You should do it without even any thought. I recommend solid state drives or thumb drives. Why? Because every time you plug them in, you're going to be able to verify that the information already on there is good. You can pull that log and say, okay, good, this looks good. and then you can then update your log to it.
There's a warning that they've got read write rates and they've got read write limitations. They can burn out.
Yeah, they do burn out after a while. I'd recommend anybody replace their thumb drive every couple of years. Just replace it. They're cheap, and these logs are not big. If you've got a 5 gigabit log, you've been at it a while, and you're a contester. Cloud storage is great, but always have a physical backup that you can walk out of the room with. Yes.
There's just one comment. If you use N1MM, do not use OneDrive.
No.
You cannot, because you can't keep up, and it will just kick you right out. So they tell you to shut OneDrive off whenever you download N1MM. That's
Yeah, I run N1MM on this laptop. I do have OneDrive activated, but I shut it down. I shut it down before the contest. You can manually shut down OneDrive to keep it from updating, and before contest, you need to do that, and then you just reactivate it once contest is over. But I want people to get into the habit of having your log updated regularly on a physical form that you can walk out of the room with, preferably in your pocket. You want to have a log that so that way, if all your stuff blows up, you still got a copy. If you want to print it out, also good. Nothing wrong with that. Don't use CDs. Don't use DVDs. FFS knows why I'm going to say this, because they will degrade, and they're going to degrade the same way in which they were made. DVDs and CDs are made with laser, so they're made with light energy. Well, that same light energy, you have them sitting on your bookshelf, exposed to incident sunlight and incident room light over years, you will find that they don't read well. You want a copy, and you want it to be on, you want copies. You want multiple copies, preferably. You know, I know FFS is going, yeah, but then you have the.
There's a simple solution to all of this. It's called a NAS.
Yeah, and that, by the way, meets a lot of requirements. It puts everything, no matter what computer on, it puts the log in one place. You can go pick your NAS up, walk out.
And if you get an ASUS store or something similar, that will actually back it up to the cloud as well.
Yeah.
So then you've got one offsite, one on-site, and
exactly. Bob's your uncle, I believe is the phrase.
family's your own.
There you go. So NAS actually meets the cloud requirement and the hard requirement. All you got to do is grab the NAS, walk out the door with it.
And if you've got a router, you can plug the NAS straight into it.
Into the router.
And N1MM keeps up.
Yeah.
N1MM all day. So you don't even need to write to your local laptop.
And you don't have to have OneDrive activated with a NAS.
You have OneDrive activated,
but you just don't need it. Yeah.
I mean, it's the same with Ultra.
So NAS is actually, he just gave me a new part for this, and that is that the NAS satisfies 2 conditions. But you want to make sure that backing up your log becomes a reflex action. That is really the important thing.
You can build a NAS with a Raspberry Pi for about $50.
Yeah.
Plus you get that.
Art.
NAS. Explain NAS for people that don't know what the
Actually,
actual.
when you do it, or do you want to do it?
I'll do it. Network attached storage is what it means. Basically, it is a combination of a hard drive, whether it be a regular hard drive or a solid state drive, or both. Yes, you can have both. You can actually have multiple drives in there, and the software that allows it to run as a storage device in conjunction with the internet. So,
It's a dumb computer. It has an operating
really,
system.
yeah.
Right? It has an operating system on a disk, and it can be one of those disks you're using. But the other disk it uses for storage. Other devices connect to it, map a drive or a share, depending on SSD, which is Windows, or NFS, which is Linux and Mac OS. And, well, they can do both actually. Most of them can do all of it now, except Windows, which does SSD and Microsoft shit. But anyway, so it appears as a drive. So you can mount that drive on Windows and write to it and read from it. Or you can stop other people doing the same thing. And it's just a remote device. It is your personal cloud.
Yeah.
And it's just somebody else's equipment.
And it attaches, and you can attach it to your router. So even the simplest, let's say your home network's pretty simple. You got a router, you got a computer upstairs, you got a computer downstairs. Your router has 4 RJ45s in the back. One goes upstairs, one goes downstairs because you don't believe in wireless. You still got 2 ports. You can plug 2 NASs in right there at the router. You don't even have to have it in the room with you. If you're using Cat 6 especially, you're going to have plenty of speed. And N1MM will keep up with that easily. It will keep up with N1MM, satisfies both requirements. Thumb drives are great if you got a single computer. However, you can lose thumb drives too. That's why I mentioned multiple backups. And you want to make it a reflex where you say, okay, I'm going to back up the thumb drive, I'm going to back up the NAS. And since I've got a cloud-based NAS that also will send it to the cloud, I don't have to worry about it. Or let's say you're one of these people who says, no, I want one drive and I want a NAS. Fine, but just make it a reflex action to back your log up. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now we're getting a little bit beyond the purposes. Now we're getting a little bit beyond the purposes of the lecture. RAID methods and stuff like that are great. But the main thing is make sure your log's backed up at all times. Make sure that at least one version of your log is portable enough that it can walk out of the room with you, whether it be a NAS, whether it be a thumb drive. If you're going to do cloud, great. In fact, I support doing cloud backup, but make sure you have it. You say, well, wait a minute. What about one went back too far? What about Logbook of the World as backup? Oh yeah, that'll work. Except when it doesn't. Ask any ham who was using Logbook of the World at a certain time in 2024 about how reliable Logbook of the World is. Look, they got held up for ransom and they had to pay some money and still had to fix their stuff. So don't be like headquarters in Connecticut. Have your stuff set up so that it's available to you. Logbook of the World. Speaking of it, we're going to talk very quickly because we only got a few more minutes. We're going to talk very quickly about the setup. So you're going to download and install TQSL. You're then going to request your initial call sign certificate and Logbook of the World account password. And for licenses in the U.S., which most of us are, I know there's some people that have licenses that are in other countries, but also have a U.S. license. For the U.S. license, you do they're going to do the postcard. They're only going to send the postcard to the address that you have on file with the FCC. So keep your stuff updated. They're not going to send it to a hotel or something like that because you decide, hey, I want up. No, they don't do that. And notice what I have down there. You must be using the same computer and the same user as when you made the initial request. Otherwise, it errors out. You can ask me how I know this.
How do you know this?
Well, guess who forgot that? And then they have to send you a new. Then you have to send a new one. Once you get the certificate filed, you'll add your station locations, and you'll be pretty much set up. There is a URL. I've got the URL right here. I'm going to be, by the way, producing a PDF of this, so that way everybody will be able to get it. And ARRL does want you to be successful, so contact them. Multiple license. Let's say you're like me and you weren't always KX4TT. At one point, I was N4MVL, the mad, vicious lunatic. And you'd have 2 certificates. I had a certificate that is now expired for N4MVL because Never going to use that call sign again for good reason. And one for my current call sign. You know, so questions.
Repeat the questions just so we make sure we have it in the mic. Repeat the question somebody asked so we have it on the mic.
Which question?
Whatever questions are asked.
Okay. So, any quick questions before we're going to do a couple of things that are going to be done. We're going to set up one of the programs so that way you can kind of see how setup goes for one of the electronic logs. I'm also going to show you how easy it is to write an ADIF file using TQSL. We're going to write a file. We're going to write a file for ADIF. Yes.
What are your thoughts on World Radio League? Have you used that at all? They're logging. It's like a cloud-based logging platform.
Well,
I'm using it now.
It has offline as well.
Just remember, anything cloud-based works until it doesn't. Yeah. Everything. That's why I'm kind of insistent that you want to have one physical backup to your log. It can be, if it's paper, that's great, except for one thing. Let's say you lose all your electronics and all you're left with is that paper log. Guess who's going to be BIC putting that log back in? So, yeah, cloud-based log. I haven't used the log myself. I generally prefer physical logs that then I can upload to the cloud, whether it be OneDrive, whether it be with an NAS. At home, I have an NAS, and I do exactly what FFS says, that it has cloud-based backup on it too. So, but I still carry a thumb drive. And the main reason I carry a thumb drive is I'm over on this computer a lot at position B, so then I just upload from the thumb drive to it when I'm done, and we're good. Let me go ahead and kill this. And let's do this real quick. Let's go to, come on, display settings.